In a previous video, we learned about the three types of battle formations that the Roman legions presented throughout history. Today, we are going to talk in detail about the Manipular legions, which were the Roman legions used during the Republic and were eliminated during the reforms of Gaius Marius. We will start from the smallest unit and end with the largest one. In addition, we will find out who led each of the units. The smallest unit of the Roman legion was the Contubernium, made up of 10 men, of which 8 were soldiers and 2 were non-combatant workers. The members of the Contubernium shared a tent and tasks. These men formed strong bonds of friendship as they spent all day working together or fighting shoulder to shoulder in battle. Each Contubernium was led by a dean, or pardon my Latin, Caput Contuberni. This leader was chosen by the members of the Contubernium themselves, usually being the most experienced among them all. He didn't have power as such, but he was responsible for his Contubernium companions behaving well in the camp or in battle. Various Contuberniums formed the century. The number of troops in the century depends on the type of unit that composed it. If they were hastati or princes, the century was composed of 80 soldiers and 20 non-combatant workers, making a total of 100 men. Of those 80 soldiers, 20 were velites, who were considered associates. That is, these velites did not fight on the front line alongside the heavy infantry, but marched with them in the same century, received the same orders, but in battle the velites went one way and the heavy infantry another. In the case of the triarii, the century was reduced to 30 triarii plus 20 associate velites. The fact that the number of troops was reduced is also because the triarii were elite units, quite advanced in age, so the number of available triarii was nowhere near as high as that of the astati or princes. The centuries were led by a centurion, who was chosen from among the well-off citizens, so to access the position you needed to have a decent economic wealth. The centurion was placed in the last row of the century, as it was necessary to prevent the century from being decapitated. The centurion was supported by an optio, whom he chose directly from among the members of the century. The optio was responsible for helping coordinate the century and communicating with other units of the legion. The optio was indeed found on the front line of combat. 2 centuries formed a Manipulus, therefore the Manipuli of princes and astati were composed of 120 soldiers, while those of triarii by 60. Let's remember that we have eliminated the associated velites. The centuries in turn were divided into 2 types, posterior century and anterior century. These names refer to how the centuries of the Manipul were placed in battle, when they had to leave corridors to be relieved or to relieve the front line. The centurion of the posterior century was the one who led the Manipulae, and in case of death, the command fell on the centurion of the anterior century. If the previous attempt failed, the same issue occurred with the options. Each Manipul had a signifer, who was in charge of carrying the standard. This position was of great responsibility as it represented the power of Rome and gave morale to the soldiers of the Manipulae. But on the other hand, it was a position of great danger as the enemy sought to seize the Roman standard. In addition, the signifer only provided a small shield for protection, so he was located in the previous century. Each row of the legion was made up of 10 manipules, each of its corresponding unit. That is, there were 10 manipules of hastati in the first line, 10 of princes in the second line, and 10 of triarii in the third line. We will talk in another video about each type of soldier, but for now I will say that the hastati were the most inexperienced of the heavy infantry, followed by the princes and finally the triarii, who were the most veteran. The triarii did not usually go into combat, and if they did, it was because things were very bad. So they were usually in charge of covering the retreat, forming a wall of spears and shields to contain the enemy, regarding the infantry. In total, we have 1200 hastati, 1200 princes, and 600 triarii. To these figures, we must add 400 velites per row, making a total of 1200 velites in the legion. Regarding the mounted units, the smallest unit was the Curia, composed of 10 riders. This unit was commanded by a Curion who had an Optio as a subordinate, just like the infantry. Therefore, the Curia had a total of 12 men. 3 Decuriae made up a Turma, which was commanded by a Centurion who had a Duplicarius as a subordinate. This latter was called so because he earned exactly twice as much as a normal rider. The Turma also had, again excuse my Latin, a Tesserarius, who was the security officer of... He was responsible for the Tessera, the password used by on-duty guards. On the other hand, each Turma had its own signifer, whose function was the same as the signifers of the Manipuls. Therefore, the Turma was composed of 40 riders. The union of 10 Turmas made up a wing, which was led by a prefect and had a total of 400 riders. Each legion had 2 wings of cavalry, one being properly Roman and the other allied. The Roman cavalry was positioned on the right flank, while the allied was positioned on the left flank. If we gather all the troops of the legion, we have a total of 5,000 soldiers. Now, this figure varied over the years, increasing or decreasing depending on the need of each moment. The legions could be commanded by a praetor, a provincial governor, or a general directly chosen by a consul. 2 legions made up a consular army, which was the usual army of the Republican era, although it would also vary depending on the needs of the Republic, such as during the Second Punic War, where according to Titus Livius, the number of troops in the consular armies was increasing over time. The consular army was led, as its name suggests, by a consul. If there was a significant threat, the 2 consuls of that year would unite their armies, having a total force of 4 legions. To lead, they alternated daily in command, something that proved not to be very effective, as seen in the run-up to the Battle of Cannae. That's it for today's video. We have thoroughly understood the composition and organization of a manipular Roman legion. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you liked the most or what you would like to learn in the next video of the Rome series.